The old house stood on a hill overlooking the town, a skeletal silhouette against the bruised twilight sky. They called it the Blackwood House, and for as long as anyone could remember, it had been empty. I just moved to town trying to escape the noise of the city and the ghosts of my own past. The low rent for the cottage at the foot of the hill was too good to pass up, even with the looming presence of Blackwood House as my new neighbor. Locals spoke of it in hushed tones. They said old Mr. Blackwood had been a recluse, a collector of strange and esoteric things. He'd vanished decades ago, leaving everything behind. Lights would flicker in the windows, they'd say, and sometimes a faint, melancholic music could be heard drifting down the hill on quiet nights. I dismissed it all as small-town folklore, something to spook the kids on Halloween. I was a rational man, a man who believed in what he could see and touch. My first week was peaceful. I painted, I read, I walked through the woods that bordered my property. But I always felt a pull toward the house on the hill. Its vacant windows felt like eyes watching my every move. One evening, as dusk settled, I saw it. A single light, flickering in an upstairs window. It glowed for a moment, a warm, inviting yellow, and then it was gone. My heart hammered against my ribs. It had to be a reflection, I told myself. The setting sun hitting an old piece of glass just right. But the sun had already set. The next night, it happened again. This time the light stayed on longer. I grabbed my binoculars. The window was grimy, but I could just make out the shape of a room, a hint of wallpaper, but nothing more. A new feeling began to mix with my unease, curiosity. It was a powerful, nagging itch I couldn't ignore. Who was up there? A squatter? A teenager playing a prank? The following day, I found a package on my doorstep. It was a small cloth-wrapped bundle with no return address. My name, Ethan, was written on a small tag in elegant, old-fashioned script. My hands trembled as I unwrapped it. Inside was a single, ornate brass key. It was heavy, cold to the touch, and intricately designed. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, what it was for. It was the key to Blackwood House. This was no longer a prank. This was an invitation. Part of me screamed to throw the key into the woods, to pack my bags and leave this town and its haunted hill behind. But the other part, the part that had been drawn to this place from the beginning, was already putting on its walking boots. The curiosity had become a compulsion. I had to know. That night, under the cold light of a full moon, I walked up the overgrown path to the house. The air grew colder with each step. The front door was massive, made of dark, weathered oak. The brass key slid into the lock with a sickeningly smooth click. The door swung inward on silent hinges, opening into a cavernous, dust-choked darkness. The air inside was thick and stagnant, smelling of decay and old paper. Moonlight streamed through the grimy windows, illuminating a grand foyer. Furniture lay shrouded in white cloths like a congregation of ghosts. A grand staircase swept upwards into the shadows. My footsteps echoed unnervingly on the marble floor. I was trespassing, an intruder in a place that had been asleep for a very long time. My goal was the room with the light. I ascended the creaking staircase, my hand trailing along the dusty banister. Every shadow seemed to writhe and twist in the periphery of my vision. On the second-floor landing, I found a long hallway lined with closed doors. At the very end of the hall, a thin sliver of light shone from beneath one of them. My heart was a frantic drum in my chest. I reached the door and hesitated. I could hear something from within. It was the faint, melancholic music the townsfolk had spoken of. A slow, sad piano melody that seemed to seep into my very bones, filling me with a profound sense of loss. I took a deep breath, turned the cold brass knob, and pushed the door open. The room was a study. Bookshelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes. In the center of the room, a single oil lamp on a large desk cast a warm, flickering glow. But the room wasn't empty. Sitting at a grand piano in the corner, with her back to me, was a woman. She was dressed in a long, dark, old-fashioned gown. Her slender fingers moved gracefully over the ivory keys, producing the mournful tune. I couldn't see her face, only the cascade of dark hair that fell down her back. I cleared my throat, the sound ridiculously loud in the quiet room. "Hello?" The music stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was heavier and more terrifying than the music had been. Slowly she turned her head. My blood ran cold. Her face was pale, almost translucent in the lamplight. Her eyes were dark, hollow pits of shadow, and they fixed on me with an ancient, sorrowful hunger. She didn't have a mouth, just smooth, unbroken skin where her lips should have been. A silent scream was trapped in my throat. I stumbled backward, my legs refusing to obey me properly. She rose from the piano bench, her movements fluid and unnatural, like a marionette being pulled by unseen strings. She didn't walk. She glided across the floor toward me, her feet making no sound. I scrambled back out into the hallway, slamming the heavy door shut. I fumbled with the lock, my fingers numb and clumsy. I didn't wait to see if it held. I bolted. I flew down the grand staircase, my feet barely touching the steps. I burst out the front door and didn't stop running until I was back inside my cottage, with the door locked and a chair wedged under the handle. I sat there all night, shaking in the dark, listening. I expected to hear her at my door, to see her pale, mouthless face in my window, but there was only silence. When the sun finally rose, I looked up at the hill. Blackwood House stood just as it had before, dark and silent. It looked empty, vacant, but I knew it wasn't. I knew she was in there, waiting. The invitation had been accepted. The key wasn't to let me in. It was to let her know I was here. I had become part of the house's story, another ghost to haunt its halls. I looked at the moving boxes I still hadn't fully unpacked. I knew I couldn't stay. You can't escape your own ghosts, but you don't have to live with someone else's. As I packed, I could almost hear it, carried on the wind, a faint, sad piano melody playing just for me. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this story. If you enjoyed the suspense, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Blackwood House. Stay safe and I'll see you in the next video.